In this video, we are going to discuss the cortical bulbar tract with its corresponding cranial nerves. We'll also explore the consequences of lesions along this tract. To start, let's begin with the basics. As we are very familiar from lectures, the cranial nerves provide sensory, motor, and autonomic nerve fibers to the head, neck, and body. Have you thought about how the brain directs the cranial nerves to work in order to allow for movement of our face, head, and neck muscles? The answer here lies with the cortical bulbar tract, which is the collection of axons of the upper motor neurons that synapse on the nuclei of the lower motor neurons that give rise to the cranial nerves 5, 7, 11, and 12. Thus, the cortical bulbar tract is a two-neuron motor tract originating from the lateral portion, the portion which serves the face, of the primary motor cortex homunculus from both hemispheres of the brain. Does this cortical bulbar tract organization remind you of another tract? This tract is similar to the cortical spinal tract, which, as you may recall from lecture, serves as the body's motor tract to allow for movement of our torso and limbs. This cortical spinal tract is also a two-neuron motor tract, but originates from the medial portion, the portion which serves the limbs and trunk of the primary motor cortex homunculus from both hemispheres of the brain. Now, let's go back to the cortical bulbar tract and follow its general trajectory. The upper motor neurons from this tract originate in the primary motor cortex. The axons of these neurons travel down through the corona radiata and converge in the genu and posterior limb of the internal capsule. From there, the axons enter the brainstem, beginning in the midbrain, or more specifically, the crus cerebri or cerebral peduncles. Then, the axons distribute to synapse on various cranial nerves, motor nuclei. The nuclei are where the axons of the upper motor neurons synapse on the lower motor neurons and give rise to the cranial nerve axons, which then exit the central nervous system to innervate the appropriate muscles. We will be focusing on cranial nerve 7, also known as the facial nerve, because of its clinical significance. Cranial nerve 7 innervates the muscles of facial expression and has its nuclei in the caudal pons of the brainstem. Each of the left and right cranial nerve 7 nuclei are separated into two regions in the brainstem, one for the upper face and one for the lower face. The portion of the cranial nerve 7 nuclei that serves the upper portion of the face, just below the eye up to the forehead, receives both contralateral and ipsilateral innervation from the cortex. That is to say that the left upper face receives innervation from the right and left motor cortices. This is contrasted with the portion of the cranial nerve 7 nuclei that serves the lower portion of the face from the mid-cheek downwards and only receives contralateral innervation from the cortex. That is to say that the left lower face only receives innervation from the right motor cortex. Let's explore how this unique innervation is clinically relevant for facial weakness. When there is an upper motor neuron lesion along the cortical bulbar tract that feeds cranial nerve 7, from a cortical stroke for example, it results in a contralateral lower face droop only. This is because there is bilateral innervation to the forehead from each side of the cortex, but only unilateral contralateral innervation from one side of the cortex to the lower face. When there is a lower motor neuron lesion in cranial nerve 7, from a Bell's palsy for example, the entire ipsilateral face is droopy. This is because no information from the cortex is being transmitted through the damaged nerve, which innervates the face ipsilaterally. So in sum, an upper motor neuron lesion will give you a contralateral lower facial droop, whereas a lower motor neuron will give you an ipsilateral hemifacial droop. A way to remember this unique innervation and how it presents clinically is that an upper motor neuron lesion spares the upper face. Thank you for watching, and we hope that we have helped to demystify the cortical bulbar tract.